Happy midweek, everyone. Thanks for checking into the Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, and it is Wednesday. I think we finished in the green for the sector here today, which is a good thing as well. President Biden, another step in the right direction pertaining to the industry. So let's dive into that and a lot more as Anthony Coniglio from New Lake Capital is going to be joining us in just a minute to talk about some of the stuff that happened in New York, some news interesting that I think you'll find interesting as well. We'll talk about the timeline of rescheduling. If we get the announcement today, what can we expect as far as next steps? You'll have a great explanation on what you can prepare for in the event that does happen. So let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varrell. Happy Wednesday. Good to see you. How are things?
Happy Wednesday. How's it going? It's good. It's good. It's been a good day. It's been an eventful day on Twitter, Green Market. It's a ton of news. It's been quite an eventful day.
You making any progress? Are we making any progress when it comes to legislation?
So obviously Chuck came out today and said that we'll try to get everything done in a bipartisan manner. He said SAFE was very important, and it was the top of his list once the government gets funded. So to see him come out and say he's going to try his best, I don't really know if that's going to suffice. But one thing that we have been doing is actually calling on the senators' offices, which I'm actually going to do right now. To urge him to attach the safe banking bill to the FAA bill that is currently going through the Senate. So let's see how this goes.
Please pause.
Thank you for calling the Washington, D.C. office of U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer. We are unable to take your call right now.
Let me try one more time.
Thank you for calling the Washington, D.C. office of U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer. We are unable to take your call right now.
I wonder if they close at 4 o'clock in good fashion. Let me try one more time.
Try it. 3 times the charm.
Thank you for calling the Washington, D.C. office of U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer. We are unable to take your call right now.
You can hear this, right?
Please leave your name, number, and a brief message.
Leave a message.
Visit Senator Schumer's website at www.schumer.senate.gov. Leave a comment or.
I'm just going to do my part tomorrow and call his office back to speak to one of his interns. But in all seriousness, we should be calling these senators' offices, especially if you're one of his constituents.
Yes.
He has interns, from my understanding, that are picking up the phone, as well as staffers that are picking up the phone. And these impressions, while you do think they don't matter, they do matter. Send a fax. It's actually pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I will call them tomorrow, and maybe I'll even try to call them on Friday on the live stream. But fact of the matter is, I'm not doing it to try to be funny. This is a very serious matter. And it's something that you should be doing. If you're a participant in this industry, these little gestures, they do add up.
They do.
And nothing's going to happen unless you see a groundswell of follow through from us. We buy the stocks, we talk about the industry. If you're not willing to commit a minute of your time, and those little minutes will add up over time to a collective effort, this can change and influence things that are going through his office. So rest assured, I just wanted to do what I said I was going to do. I don't know why his office isn't picking up right now. Maybe we'll have to call Don Murphy and get him on the bat signal. But rest assured, I will get in touch with his office, and we will do this another day to see how this process actually works.
There you go. We need some applause sound effects in the background. Arns, can you do that right now, buddy? If not, no worries. Woosifer, I hear you, man. He's pulling a Booker. That is absolutely bang on with that. Grant, you wrote, thought you called today was supposed to be that special guest today. Hey, we got Anthony Coniglio. He's a great guest. So he'll be on. As far as this other guest, we did get a verbal confirmation, but we did find out that this guest is up in the plane right now, flying to the NFL draft tomorrow in Detroit. So we'll keep you posted. We are still working on this, but as soon as we get absolute confirmation, we'll make the announcement as to who we're going to have on. But for now, we'll just have to keep you guys waiting, and apologies for that. So let's jump into the Wire. I'm your host, Shad Dales, Anthony Varrell, here the Traded Black podcast here on a Wednesday, April the 24th. And we begin with the big headline of the day, once again involving the President of the United States, President Biden. He believes that America is a nation founded on the promise of second chances. And this comes after he made the announcement of pardoning 11 drug offenders. Big step, I think. Well, regardless of what size of step, it's the step in the right direction, Anthony, as the government continues, I guess, another step on maybe looking at things differently when it comes to drug offenders, and more notably with what we cover, cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, this was this was good to see, but at the same time, like, it's 11 people. Like, really, like, is this making moving the needle? Granted, it's 11 lives that are better off today than they were yesterday. But at the same time, there's 22,000 people incarcerated in federal prison, in state prison, for drug offenses, and there are 10,000 people incarcerated at the federal level.
Okay.
It's time to let those people out of jail that are in jail for non-violent cannabis offenses. If you can move THCA and different cannabis products over state borders, and they're being sold in gas stations, and there's illegal dispensaries in New York City that are operating on a daily basis, there should not be a single person left incarcerated for non-violent cannabis offenses. The only reason why, and the only answer to that, to that problem is the fact that it's still a business and they're generating profit for the private prison sector.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because there are plenty of people right now in broad daylight that are violating the laws of this country, and they're not in jail. Like, 11 people, great. 1,100 would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's get this done. I mean, Weldon Angelos has done great work regarding this. I mean, I'd love to have him on to talk more in depth into this project.
Yeah.
But small step, we need way more. Like, let's get this done. More action.
This topic runs deep for many years and decades pertaining to the industry. And you can understand why, well, you don't understand as to why this has been such a slow moving process in so many fronts because of the history that's behind this. But you're talking about, in a lot of ways, 40, 50 years of absolute corruption pertaining to the plant. And, we live in a day and age now where we see the truth. Now, as we keep saying, it's about getting the key messaging, the right messaging in Washington. I know you were speaking to Jim McMahon and Ricky Williams's camp again earlier today, but sounds like they have some plans to head back there next month. That'll be encouraging to see who they speak to, but they have made their promise and commitment. They want to go back and bring over bigger and bigger crowds each time. So that's the kind of stuff that's got to be done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcus, I completely get that. I mean, they go hand in hand. You can't let people out of jail for cannabis and still have cannabis at Schedule 1.
Yeah, 100%.
That makes absolutely no sense. I mean, if you're going to let everybody out in a swift motion, you're going to have to. That would imply that we've already rescheduled to Schedule 3 or greater. Otherwise, it would make absolutely no sense.
You want to highlight some of the examples of the 11 that they pardoned, because these were jaw-dropping examples as to like what these people actually were charged with, the amount of time they spent in jail. But this gives you a clear indication as to like how's this stuff even come to fruition to begin with.
Yeah, there was one example in the article. I'm pretty sure she went in at 18. She just got out at 54 for pleading guilty to a non-violent drug charge. In at 18, out at 54. She got her PhD while in prison. So that's what this is doing to people's lives. It's unbelievable.
I don't even have any words for that. 18 years old and 54, got her PhD in prison.
That is a life completely ruined by just nonsensical drug policy. In at 18, out at 54.
Yeah. It's 420 Media Agency writes, do you guys really not understand? It's been corrupt since the beginning back in the 30s. Yeah.
I mean, we can get into a whole different, we could have an hour-long conversation about how the war on drugs is racially motivated. And I'm a true believer in that. That's not conjecture. I mean, that's fact if you really want to really dig into it. But I mean, we don't really have the time or place to go into that right now.
Yeah. Joe Montana, I think there were some discussions too with he sounds like he might get more involved in this. Yeah.
I wouldn't be that is actually a misconception. Joe Montana is not getting into cannabis. Joe Montana was actually an early investor in Nabis, from what I heard about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So he's been investing in non-plant touching businesses for about the last 5 years. But just another person, another prominent figure that we hope to get up to Washington with us the next time around.
Very promising, to say the least, to get people like him involved. He's actually a name that I think could actually turn a lot of heads in Washington, I think. Not to say sit here and say Ricky and Jim aren't, they are as well, but that would be a big, big added component. Then you start to see if somebody like him gets involved, and then could you start to see, the Mike Tysons, Snoop Dogg's, D Wades of the world. You can really start to see that something small, you make it continuous, the word gets out, they start to see some of the feedback, the discussion, the momentum is starting to take place. And I think this is where things really start to take off, but it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
All right. Into the wire, headlining all the biggest headlines here on the Trade to Black podcast here on a Wednesday, April the 24th. Let's now move to New York. This is an intriguing story. And that on that note, I actually wanted to bring in Anthony Coniglio from NY Capital to talk about this. Good day, sir. How are you?
Great, guys. How are you doing?
Good. Good to see you last week down in Florida. As I said, I wanted to switch to New York. This is an interesting story. It's a recent article published in the New York media company called The City, and it outlines that last June, New York Governor Kathy Hochul announced a much anticipated deal had finally been reached to fund a $200 million public-private fund that would finance cannabis dispensaries run by the people who have been the most impacted by the war on drugs. The story later alleges that based on a cache of documents, including a near final 84-page draft of the agreement, internal agency emails and financial projections, they said, reveals that the New York State instead signed off on a lopsided deal that undermines its commitment to social equity goals. So Anthony Varrell, I'll ask you first, and Anthony C., I'll get your feedback, but is this story credible? What'd you make of it?
All right. I got increasingly angry as I was reading the article because of the circus that this lays out that has gone on in New York.
Okay.
So they're trying to paint the financier and the fund in a negative light here. Not the case. The funding for the original fund at a 15% interest rate, that is not predatory by any means in startups or cannabis lending. But as you read the article, they had a third party create the projections for these dispensaries on behalf of the licensees that would get them. Where I come from, if you want to own a business and operate a business, you better be able to create the numbers on your own, because that proves that you actually understand and can run a business. That was problem number one that was just glaring to me. You shouldn't be running a dispensary if you can't run through simple financial metrics and build your business on paper. Number two, seemed like crony capitalism on behalf of Kathy Hochul and the New York OCM. They were having contractors come in and build out the dispensaries and then basically invoicing the potential licensees for the storefront. So the licensee has zero transparency or say in what's getting built out. Basically, the social equity applicants, they go to them and say, look, here's a dispensary, here's the bill, here's the note that you're going to need to pay. You don't really have a say in anything else. Pay us back in X amount of years. And all these contractors, when reached out for comment, they signed NDAs. There was one of them where I think the projections were anywhere between $500,000 and $1.1 million to build out the complete storefront. At the end of that, the licensee got a $2.1 million bill. And when the contractor, I think, was contacted, something like they spent $250,000 building it out. So there were obviously fees and there were obviously things tacked on along the way, but this in no way, shape, or form is to be put on the funder. This whole system is completely ass backwards. The way that they architected, the way that they constructed it, and the way that they really shifted the burden to the licensees at the end of the day. I'll let Anthony kind of take it from there because he's got a much more, I guess, in-depth look being in New York.
Yeah, welcome in, Anthony.
Some the intricacies into what happened.
And listen, always great to be with you guys. And as usual, you're bringing the relevant topics to the discussion here today. And so we too were involved and had looked at this program for a while and had conversations with the state and the city as they were considering different ways to roll this out. And so, listen, why are we here? We're here because the state decided that it wanted to skew the licensing process towards a particular group but they failed to ensure that their preferred applicants were actually set up for success. That's the fundamental issue here. And, we could have a separate conversation about if it's right as a policy matter to do that or not. But the reality is, for most of the people watching this, they understand enough about the cannabis industry to understand that in order to really be successful, at least for us, I'll just speak for us at New Lake, in order to be successful, our view is pretty simple. You have to have a lot of experience in running a high growth business in a highly regulated industry.
Yep.
And you also need access to significant capital. Those are the two real keys. And when you look at the way they set this up from a licensing perspective, I think they understood those, but they only took half steps towards them. And let me explain that. So on the experience side, there was absolutely a requirement in the licensing process to say that you needed to have experience. I think they called it the qualifying business experience. And you had to have 2 years of profits. But it made no distinction if you were able to get the profits from running a newsstand or running an aircraft manufacturing business. It's not to say one is better than the other, but one is clearly much more highly regulated than the other. And so putting somebody into a dispensary operation that's very highly regulated, just because they made money at an unregulated business, doesn't mean they have the chops to make money doing this. And then from a capital perspective, they clearly knew that the people that they were targeting for the Curad licenses, they clearly knew that they needed additional capital. It's why they set up the fund.
Yeah.
The problem was they woefully underestimated the amount of capital necessary for these businesses. And a lot of people don't really go into the details. And as usual, it's all about the details. If you look at the requirements for a dispensary, just go to the OCM's website. You look at the requirements, you have to have a vault for storage. You have to have security cameras. You have to have training for your employees. You have to have a POS system that connects to the state. All of these cost money. And the training and the people you have to have is a drag on earnings until you get profitable. And so it requires a meaningful amount of capital. And the state just completely underestimated that. And in fact, just one more point while I'm on this is, when you look at the $200 million, there's roughly 175 licenses that they were targeting with the $200 million.
Yep.
That's only a little over $1 million per license. In my opinion,
dead in the water.
Dead in the water. And so what the state would have had to do is it would have had to pick winners and losers to decide, of the 175 licenses, maybe we only give to 75 or to 50, but the state was really unwilling to have that arbitrary perspective. And I think that was why it was so hard for them to find organizations to step in, because they wanted to spread this around to so many people, and you were going to end up making it very difficult for any of them to succeed.
Anthony C., how does something like this even happen? How does this happen?
Yeah, I think it happens because there's a political agenda, and they're trying to force a political agenda into a capitalist system.
Yeah.
Now, I think the public-private partnership was the right way to go. I just think they missed the fact that the state, if it really wanted to do this, the state probably should have come out with some grants so that you didn't have that repayment burden on the licensees.
Yeah.
But it also should have come out with a larger inducement for organizations to participate in order to minimize the credit risk that they were creating by underfunding all of these organizations. And so I think the concepts were there in terms of requiring experience and in terms of providing additional capital. I just think it was maybe not even a half step, maybe a quarter step to what it needed to be.
Yeah, I mean, the example that I laid out from the article, the gentleman that just walked away from the dispensary, they literally built out the dispensary, $1.6 million in build out. He owns a pet store 2 blocks over. No knock on that. I mean, I'm sure that's a tough business to run in itself.
There's regulations in that for sure.
It's regulated, it's retail, but just because you own a pet store doesn't mean you're going to be able to run a cannabis dispensary. I mean, much less talking about managing the cash flow cycle to keep the thing afloat via the product that you're going to have to procure from the wholesale market. I don't understand why New York didn't take this idea. They have some of the brightest minds in the world in finance and in big business, and create an incubator for these entrepreneurs or these social equity applicants that they wanted to come into the system, teach them how to run these businesses and actually be good stewards of the capital that they're deploying into these. Because what it looks like is is they wanted to put all these dispensaries in and then basically just take them out, just let them burn and take them over with the state almost.
Yeah, I think they wanted. I think they wanted to put up the flag that they were assisting a particular segment of the population. And again, in many ways, I applaud that as a policy matter. But they just went about it in the wrong way. And even if you look at the rollout of adult use, by restricting the 10 ROs, the original licensees, by restricting them from getting open, it allowed all these other dispensaries, illegal dispensaries, to take root, which only created much more competition for the other licensees than if they would have allowed the 10 original ROs. There would have been less of a competitive environment had they allowed them get open and kept at bay all of this illicit activity. I'm not suggesting there wouldn't have been any, but I think you would have seen significantly less illicit activity if they allowed the 10 ROs to step in at the outset of the program.
Yeah, absolutely.
This may sound ridiculous to ask, but do you think when you hear horror stories like this in New York, it actually will make the market better? Knowing how much cleanup they have to do and it's revealed, like, what do you make of this? And is there any kind of learning lesson brought into this to get this state right eventually?
Well, while I personally hate to hear the type of stuff that was described in this article, and I can't verify that it's all accurate, there is that saying that sunlight is the best sanitizer. And so transparency and a focus on the issue is the way we'll get pressure on the authorities to actually focus on common sense solutions that can get this market right, because we need to get the market right so the consumer in New York State can have access to reliable, quality, tested product, so that the business owners in that state can actually experience the rewards of their efforts and have a fair playing field in trying to compete in a legal market, let alone having to compete with thousands of illegal businesses.
Yeah. Ben Lubin actually writes a good comment here, which is the licensing process will be further reviewed and amended over the next 20 years. Established licenses will be adjusted accordingly over the years as the market rolls out, evolves, and matures. Indeed. There's just another example. This industry, Canada, US, it's like everybody was in a race to get out first, but there are so many mistakes that were along the way. And now we're starting to see the
it was also just the basis of the article blaming the financier. Like that,
I thought that was inappropriate.
That to me, if you had a second grade education in finance and understood what goes on in the sector, everything that they did was by the book. I mean, from a financing perspective, a private equity firm, they're in the business of risk mitigation. They're not going to just give a blank check to the state of New York to give it to unseasoned entrepreneurs that's not backed by the real estate or not backed by the government. Like, they're not in the business of giving away free money.
Absolutely.
The claims in the article were baseless and ludicrous and just misleading.
I agree with that. I think put in this context, providing capital or credit to any organization, whether it be for equity or for debt, for a lease, or even for trade receivables, it all requires a sense of underwriting. I mean, anybody here, you go to rent an apartment, they run your credit and they do an underwriting of credit. If you have a business and you go for a bank loan, they underwrite your business, they evaluate your financials. It's what any good lender or investor would do. And frankly, it's a fiduciary responsibility to do that to your investors. And so you have to carry on that fiduciary responsibility in executing that investment process. And the fact that they weren't able to attract more capital providers is a real indication that the risk reward dynamic isn't there. And if people think it's specific to cannabis, yes, we all know it's hard for cannabis, but think about the thousands of businesses across the US and the state legal business that all raised capital, whether it was a mom and pop that raised capital for the dispensary or somebody that raised capital for a craft grow in Illinois. People are raising capital because there are providers of capital that look at the risk reward. And the fact that New York State constructed a program that lacked the ability to attract multiple counterparties to the table really speaks to how the state designed it. Has nothing to do, as you pointed out, with who ultimately provided the capital.
Yeah, and I mean, the major design flaw, I mean, you could look at it in terms of VC. Let's say that this was a seed fund for venture capital businesses. Out of that 175, 4 might succeed. And in this game, those 4 can't be unicorns. So they're not going to carry the portfolio. They're not going to give you your investment back. But chances are they're all going to crash and burn, with the exception of maybe 2% of those first-time entrepreneurs that came into that program.
Yep.
So to underwrite it without any sort of guarantees, which it makes no sense. You'd have to be a fool.
Yeah.
Right. And the state hasn't made it any easier on any of those operators by allowing hundreds and thousands of illegal stores to be able to compete with them. And so it just makes the investment thesis even harder for anybody that provides capital, whether it even be somebody in the industry that's selling them wholesale product or product in the wholesale market. You have to think, are they going to be able to sell enough product to be able to pay me ultimately? So it's been a difficult process all through and through.
This is the TDR Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, on with Anthony Varrell and Anthony Coniglio from New Lake Capital here on a Wednesday, April the 24th. We had some comments. Oscar Ramirez writes, the crypto bill being looked at May 10th. We did outline that earlier this week. Hopefully safe banking gets involved. And by the way, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here as well, last week, you and I had a very good conversation just about his timeline and rescheduling. And I wanted you actually to share this to some of our viewers. So let's say, like, hypothetical, give an example. Let's say tomorrow morning we wake up, rescheduling is announced. Maybe go into detail with some of the stuff that you shared me as to like what then opens up. They want to hear feedbacks, how many comments that we can basically anticipate. What is the next steps that people can basically prepare for in the event that were to happen?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll do that, but I'll give you a caveat first, which is I am no expert in this. And what I'm trying to do is read what experts are saying about this. I even posted earlier today, I reposted a tweet from Shane Pennington, which was a paper that him and two other individuals co-authored about a year or two ago. And I'd suggest it is terrific in terms of content and really laying out the process. Complicated, not because they made it complicated, but it is a complicated administrative government-oriented process. But I think it's a terrific document. So anybody that wants to know more, you could either go to my Twitter handle and find it there. You could go to Shane's and find it there. Maybe even you guys could repost it. That being said, here's what I understand it to be. It gets announced tomorrow. That kicks off a comment period. And this assumes, by the way, that the DEA decides to not just come out with a final rule. I understand that they could take that as an option, but most people that I follow, that I speak to that know about this stuff, don't think they're likely to take that path. So let's assume that's off the table. So they announce it. It kicks off a rulemaking, a comment period. And so it gets posted in the Federal Register. The new rule is out there. And there is roughly 60 days, or by statute says 60 days for this comment period. And that's where individuals and organizations can submit comments on that proposed rule to the DEA. Hearings can be requested. The DEA can choose to hold the hearings. I think most people expect that if requested, the DEA would probably grant these administrative hearings to have witnesses come and testify and provide, instead of written commentary, oral commentary. I understand that the 60-day period could likely be extended beyond 60 days to 90 days. I haven't seen any examples of it going beyond 90 days. But once that comment period ends, then the DEA has to go into a final rulemaking process. And so what that means, by statute, they have to look at all the comments that have come in, and they have to reply to those comments. Doesn't mean they're addressing every single comment specifically, but they have to look at those comments, and in the final rule, they have to, in one way or another, address that issue as either being mitigated or adjusting the final rule accordingly. And they do this. This isn't just for cannabis.
So how much timeline then pertaining to that? You have a 60, potentially 90-day window for comments, and then they basically make a final ruling. So how much timeline are we looking at that as far as them reviewing all these comments? Do we know?
I'm not aware of a set limit for them to do it, because if they receive 5 comments, they could do it faster than if they receive 5,000 comments. And back from my banking days in the banking world,
I would assume they're going to receive 5,000.
I would assume it's going to be up there in the thousands as well. And, again, I want to be clear, this is not specific to the DEA. If you look at rulemaking in banking, or even rulemaking, the FTC doing some rulemaking, there is this procedure that the agencies have to abide by. And so then once they do that, then they come out with the final rule. And that's why when we look at timing, a lot of people want and expect something to happen in April, May, so they can think about that 90-day process for the comment period, and then expect another 90, maybe 3-month to 5-month process for the final rule. And so we could be seeing, if you get something to drop tomorrow, maybe it's December, January when the final rule is published.
Does that comment period, does that also imply that is the time where lawsuits can be filed against the rule in a federal court?
I didn't see anything in what I read that would restrict the timing on lawsuits. I would expect that the lawsuits can go at any point in time in the rulemaking process.
Yeah,
you should ask the lawyer. I know you've got someone coming on. Hopefully,
Eric Berlin's actually from Denton's, and for those that don't know, he was on a while back, but he's respected as probably the best attorney in this space across the country. He's joining us at 11 a.m., so we'll go more in depth. But I just want to give people kind of an idea of a timeline to kind of manage expectations that if there's an announcement made, tomorrow, next week, the week after, that people understand what that first announcement means and what are the next steps, obviously, moving forward after that.
Yeah, I think I've heard it's anywhere from
I've heard anywhere from 6 to 7 months.
Yeah,
is what to expect if it was announced tomorrow.
So do you guys then want to highlight the concerns or clarify that in the event that we get, this election, Biden's behind it, let's say he's not reelected and there's, a new administration that's in office, what are some of the concerns that people are bringing up, like how Trump views it? Is this something completely separate that the DEA is involving? Like, is there chances of a new administration coming in and kiboshing this? Or do they have the authority really to do that? Or would they even have the interest of doing that? Either one of you.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
So I think since this is an administrative issue, I think it's a personal opinion, not based in fact. I think as long as the final rule is done by an inauguration, assuming Donald Trump wins in November, if it's done by the inauguration, I don't think this is important enough policy for the Trump administration to ask HHS to now reschedule to Schedule 1. Even if he did, I just don't know that there would be the basis for HHS to go back on the 252 pages that they published already. I don't want to say impossible, but seems ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's the perfect situation for him. Imagine the previous administration. Why wouldn't it be?
But because you can't invalidate 255 pages that just came out of a federal agency saying one thing, and then you can't have them exactly reverse that. What are they going to say? Oh, we were wrong.
No. But what I'm saying is that if he were to make president, this is the perfect situation where previous administration got the ball rolling. In the event that people are against this, he has his hands off of it. If it's passed through, then he's going to take all the economic value and benefit from that. So I think
you think he's going to take? Yeah. You think he's going to take the? Oh, he's going to take credit for it.
What I will tell you, the risk is it doesn't get done before the inauguration, and Milligram is out, and a new DEA administrator is in, and a new DOJ head is in, and this issue just sits on the back burner and isn't a priority relative to the other priorities. And does the final rule just sit and not get published? That's kind of the big risk. If the proposed rule happens soon and the final rule doesn't happen before an inauguration, a lot of people are focusing on the election. I think the DEA would see through what they started by the inauguration and not stop what they were doing just because of an election. But once you get new administration in there, that's where you could get the delay, is my opinion.
Yeah, that's for sure. Good conference last week, I thought. Do you want to add anything else to that, Anthony?
I would be interested to talk to, we're going to talk to Eric on Friday. How, if let's say that were to happen, the final rule doesn't get put into place and it just sits on the shelf, what kind of legal precedent can be taken all the way to the Supreme Court, which is where we'd have to go, based on the HHS recommendation, or even like the Boys lawsuit, like the constitutionality of just the way the CSA is right now. That's where it will have to go. If Trump were to put somebody in that just says, "All right, well, this is fine. We're going to put it over here and just sit on it for till we think it's damn well fine and roll."
If you go back to that document that I was talking about earlier that Shane penned a couple of years ago, and
it was great.
Read through that again and think about that question. What they came to again and again was the leeway that the judicial system has given the DEA specifically, but generally agencies within the administrative branch, the leeway they've given them when Congress gives them leeway. And when you actually read the statutes and the CSA and put all this together, Congress absolutely deferred a lot of judgment to the DEA. And so there's nothing that I read there that talks about the time. Certainly it's a good question to ask. Like if they sat on it for 3 years, would you have a case? But there's a lot of latitude for the DEA and the DOJ to use judgment.
Yeah.
You busy Friday morning? Want to join us?
I don't know. I might be, we'll see.
You guys agree with this comment? Percy Lex writes, cannabis support could sway over 10% of the vote, so they will probably both advocate.
We'll see. I don't personally think it's that high. I do think, though, that Biden did announce today that he's going to sign a bill to ban TikTok. That's going to piss off the same people that cannabis would probably be. That's going to piss off the same people that would probably be in favor of cannabis. So he's going to have to do something, because banning TikTok is going to piss off a lot of people. It's going to reduce the income of a lot of people. I mean, they said there's something like 130 million Americans that are on TikTok. So it's not just kids. Something is going to need to counterbalance that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would have two responses to that. I think number one, when you go into the ballot box, you're thinking about the safety for you and your family. You're thinking about your economic prospects. I'm not sure it ranks up there very high in the voting booth. I think a lot of people care about it, but in the voting booth, to pull the lever for one candidate or another, I'm not sure it ranks that high for 10%. But also my second point is, if you go back to any election night that's in your memory and you go back to watching whatever channel you watch, they're always zeroing in on a short list of counties and the election results in counties. And so when you really come down to the Electoral College and how you win an election, and what the strategists on both sides are doing right now is thinking about what's going to move the individuals in those particular counties. I think you'd have to really drive into that data to understand, does cannabis become an issue for those folks? And perhaps in some counties, maybe in Pennsylvania, it does become an issue. Maybe in Florida, it does become an issue. Michigan, maybe not. I don't know. It would require going to that level.
You guys think it's a real possibility that TikTok is going to get banned in the U.S.?
I mean, he signed the bill. It's going to get legally challenged, I'm sure, but there's 9 months. There's a 9-month runway right now to sign that bill. And it's funny because it's ban or divest. Yeah. So they can ban it, or they can sell it to a group of American investors. That the last headline was Steve Mnuchin was actually leading a group of investors to buy TikTok. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm not a fan of TikTok. I don't have TikTok. I've never used TikTok. I think it's used in the wrong ways. I think it also probably does foster community in the right way. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that use it for their own benefit. But if it's really, and I don't know any of this, this is just conjecture. If it really is owned by the Chinese government and they really are using it as a backdoor into your phones and going through your data and all of the privacy violations, and that is true, they do the same stuff to our tech companies in China. So why shouldn't we ban TikTok domestically? It's not out of the entire realm of possibility here.
There's your problem right there. The problem with TikTok, that it's not owned or controlled by American media conglomerates. I think there's
it'd be even worse.
Truth to that.
If it was owned by an American media conglomerate, it'd be worse. I can guarantee you that. If CNN or Fox News owned TikTok,
wouldn't have gotten
that's
passed.
worse. That's worse than China.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to lose TikTok, folks. I think the bill itself, as I understand it, has the president has the opportunity to delay another 3 months if something. So I think we'll see a group that'll emerge. I think there'll be a negotiation. I wouldn't be surprised to see it have to get extended beyond the year. But I think ultimately they'll move it out of Chinese hands. They'll just they'll figure out a way to do it. I don't think it's going away.
Last topic.
I agree with you completely.
Last topic I bring up, Dylan Rogers brought up. Did you guys get a chance to see Meta earnings? Looked like revenue was good, but their capital expenses are through the roof, which is why the stock was plunging. Did the earnings did come out from what I see, or is just the stock plunging itself right now? Did you guys get a chance to see that?
I
have not seen it, but they should be.
New York, they'll be fine.
They should be a beneficiary of this TikTok stuff, right? As people are thinking about how to spread their marketing dollars. If there's a risk TikTok goes away, people might spend more on Facebook to establish themselves there from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
Anthony, how many years How many years did you spend on Wall Street?
Oh, let's see. I spent about almost 15 years at JP Morgan. And then I was at Canadian Bank for a handful of years before that, and Price Waterhouse for 5 years before that. So kind of as a more traditional investment banker, probably close to 15 years.
How were you in some of those days during that week in 2008? Bet you those were some interesting times.
So I was a financial institutions banker at JP Morgan, which was really at the epicenter of dealing with the financial crisis. If you remember, JP Morgan stepped in to buy Bear Stearns. We were advisors to a lot of folks. And so I focused on the finance companies. My partners on the banking side that sat doors down from me were on the bank side. It was a fascinating time. Every weekend, for a period of time in the fall, there was another bank teetering. Some didn't fall, and as we know, some did.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating to be in the front row of that financial crisis, and we had something like over $8 billion of credit exposure just within the group that I managed on our books at the time that happened. And it was a difficult year in working through all of that. We didn't lose any money. We worked through it all. But it's a fascinating time and lots of lessons learned.
I'm sure it was. Were the streets and bars after happy hour full during that time, or was it pretty quiet for a couple of months after that?
We weren't out in the bar. We were back in the office, kind of working on restructurings. Yes, I'm sure they were when people finally got out. And one of our senior bankers told a story. I mean, one of Jamie's top 5 lieutenants ran one of the major business. I won't say the name, but he tells a story how he was walking across the plaza at our corporate office, and I worked in our global headquarters in New York. He was walking across the plaza at about 4 or 5 in the morning one day in the midst of all this, and he saw the ATM, the Chase ATMs were flashing. That's just what they do. They flash. And he walked over and he took out a few $100s from the ATM. And he said, I had no reason to do it. I had all the reason to have the faith in the system, but it was that crazy a time that a senior banker at JP Morgan took out a few $100s just to have in his pocket. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if AIG fell, we were in trouble. I like The Big Short, but there was a really good movie that HBO made called Too Big to Fail on the financial crisis. I watch it once a year just to remember how bad it could have been. It could have been, but here's the thing, and I tend to be optimistic. Our system is very resilient, and I do believe we would have figured a way out of it. I mean, just look at what this country did coming out of the financial crisis.
I know.
Rebuilt so much better. We could argue whether it was Fed policy or not. The fact that we were able to get that growth and rebuild the financial system, and we continue to have the strongest financial system in the entire world, even coming out of such a short period of time. I think it's a testament to the system that we have here. Anyway, I'm very optimistic about the country, even where we are. We have a lot of debt today. There's a lot of macro issues, but I'd still rather be living here in America than anywhere else on earth.
100%.
I'm coming to join you, boys. If you can't beat them, join them.
Come on.
That's my goal. Listen, I know there's a couple other topics that we're supposed to get into. We're going to pass those and push those out till Friday because we're at 45 minutes now. You guys okay with that?
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I was going to bring up some of the stocks. How are we looking so far this week? It's a Wednesday. Anything grab your eye, either one of you in the space?
Volume has been anemic. The only thing that's had a exciting, actually, no, not even. No, it's been an anemic week. I'm not buying, I'm not selling, I'm not really doing, I haven't done anything in the market since last week. I'm just
selling May and go aways around the corner. A lot of comments here today. Appreciate everybody for reaching out. As usual, once we have this upload on the YouTube channel, if you could add more comments, that would be great. Smash that like button. As I said before, we want this to go viral. And as I said off the top, we're going to get an affiliate link. We'll organize that. But if you guys could start networking, get 10 people signed up to subscribe to the Baked In newsletter, I'm going to give away a hoodie and a hat. How's that sound? Does it sound sounds toasty. As well, as I said, Eric Berlin, Friday morning at 11 a.m. He'll be joining us from Denton's to talk about more about rescheduling and just understanding what next steps. And as well, Dan the Chartman will join us to talk about the week that was had. And we'll probably look at the crypto space as well. Bitcoin still humming? Is it flat?
It's down. It's actually down on the day. And I will be heading to Pinehurst on Saturday, right after the show.
Well,
so I am excited for Friday to get here.
There you go. All right, gents. Appreciate you joining us here today, Anthony. Let's keep in touch. Anthony V. I will see you Friday morning. In the meantime, everybody, thanks for checking in. Like, smash, subscribe. Appreciate. Leave comments below, and we'll see you back here. Trade to Black podcast Friday morning, 11 a.m. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.